Hello, and welcome to this week's Octatrack video. This week I'm going to do something a little bit short because I have had a cold for the last few days and trying to rest my voice a little bit. So I did find something really cool, and I am excited to share it with you guys, so let's just get started. Today I want to talk about Thru Machines. A few weeks back, maybe even a couple months back, I did a tutorial on how you can use the ADSR on a Thru machine to affect the attack of it. So for example, just to set up the scene, we have an OP1 going into my input A. Input A is maxed out, levels maxed out because this thing doesn't have a very strong signal going in. Basically, the general concept of a Thru machine is you tell it to let in the signal with an ADSR-based command, trig rather. So if I have hold and release set to infinite, this first trig will basically give me a signal that is on. If I take that off, or if, for example, I set this to release 0, this will only play for the spaces that I have it set up. So actually, I'm just going to do this in 16 steps. Or rather, I can just tell it to play one step. So the cool thing that I found out recently is that when you go to your, so if you hold function and you press down and up, there are a few different options here. There's chromatic, where you can basically play a sample. So for example, if I have this hi-hat thing here, I could play it chromatically, or claps rather. If I wanted to play the slots, this is actually every audio file in my audio pool. So like all of these are now, which I still haven't actually used. Really cool function. Slices, so this is your pretty much your general, if I have, for example, a chain here that is sliced into 16 slices. They've been evenly spaced out for that purpose. I downloaded this off Sample Magic, or not Sample Magic, but Samples from Mars, and I will link that below. And I can basically play these. All right, this is filtered. Yeah, there's a weird attack thing. Cool. So one thing that I found out on accident, really, as a lot of things that I find out on the Octatrack are, is that on a Thru machine, the slice thing still does something, even though it doesn't show you that it's doing anything. If I have, for example, like the ADSR basically applies when I play these trigs. So say I hold down a note, or a chord rather, turn off my ARP, hold down a chord, it seems to treat the 4 pages here as velocity-based, sort of like ins, so to speak. I don't know how else to describe it, but basically you go to 4th page and you get a full level launch of the trig, as if you're playing a trig. And likewise, if I set the release to 0, so this is more or less like what I was showing in my previous Getting Creative with Thru Machines video, where if you set the ADSR to something special, then you get some interesting creative ideas, like I could hold down a chord and have a pattern letting in the signal at a rhythmic pace. But what I like about this in particular is that I went to a jam yesterday and I brought my Octatrack and I basically gated my own synth, or I gated somebody's voice as they were singing, and I could do that in real time, and I wouldn't have to worry about having everything bounded to the click track, for example, which in a jam setting, unless you're going to just come in and say like everybody follow the click, it's not always the best solution. So in a pinch, it's really nice to be able to just rhythmically, get some of that and it really shows, like, for example, if I'm, you know, playing something and I don't want it to be exactly on time, like in these trigs, I can kind of something like that. And really the implications of these are fairly similar to the getting creative with Thru Machines, in that pretty much anything you put in here can now be an opportunity for more creativity. Because, for example, say I have my effects as the filter, which is one of my favorite things to do. Just to show you guys what I'm working with here, I'm going to set this release to infinite and let in the signal. I have on the OP1, there's sort of a makeshift chord holding function where you can sort of write a chord. Let me see. And if I'm here, I can just turn this knob and it'll hold that chord. I just have to tell it to actually be holding it. Let's turn this down a little bit. There we go. Sounds kind of like sicko mode. Hold on, I'm gonna look that up and figure out how to play that real quick. Anyway, so I have these two chords. And it's much more interesting if I use these two scenes that I designed, which I'm going to basically show you one way of performing with this sort of trig-based method, because basically I've set up my filter so that it is plucking the signal. But this is a live signal, so you know, whatever I do to this signal, and then I have this second scene, which is basically opening up that filter, and it's doing a few things. It's increasing the release on the pluck so that it creates a more... I basically am simulating almost like a louder tone on like a string. If you were to pluck a string, you would get more resonance, you'd get higher frequencies, kind of going from muted to open string. So in a lot of ways, that's increasing the release, opening the filter, increasing the time it takes, the decay for the filter to close on itself, and reducing the amount that it actually closes. And then increasing the reverb just a little bit from 19 to 37. And so that creates... It could be a bit more more drastic. I think it has to do with the amount of release I have on it. Oops. Yeah, so basically that allows me to take so if I was playing this live, you know, and then on top of that, there's all kinds of fun ways you can use. Something I was experimenting with earlier was using a using this radio antenna on the OP1 to get some interesting samples. So I'm gonna try that real quick.
94.7 The Wave. How are you doing today? It's Tammy. Yes, I have more Earth, Wind, and Fire tickets on the way. And Tina, the Tina Turner musical, is playing in London at the Aldwych Theatre through December. Then to Broadway.
So that should be in there. Oh, well, first of all, you can do... Sorry, I got distracted. It's easier if you're doing something that doesn't have rhythm, because then that kind of like fucks with the inherent rhythm of your track. So I think there's like a, what is it, 91.5 is our classical station. Yeah, there we go. Obviously quieter. Oh, went to the wrong station. Here we go. Not the best remix in the world, but you get the picture. So that's something that I've been kind of playing with this past week. I was just sampling something from the radio and kind of like put together a quick sequence. Oh, right. So this is that bit that I sampled from that woman on 94.7. So, I mean, you could keep that. So if we were to turn off our... And so then if you wanted to, for example, sample that, one way you could do that is by taking your Thru Machine, just setting it up so that it records itself. I would recommend, as I have in the past, recording internally, not using the direct in, but actually recording what you hear so that you have a good idea of what the levels are. So you'd have track 4 right here, and then one of the tricks to this would be setting this to recording trigger, or record buffer 4. And what that lets you do is stay on this track, because you can only play these when you're on this track. If you move to another track, you'll be playing those. So I would stay on this track, be able to resample, but then the sample itself can be played back on track 1, which is reading from record buffer 4. A bit of background: each of these tracks is hardwired recording-wise to its own record buffer. So track 4 will always record to record buffer 4, and so on. But they can play from any record buffer. So I could have like tracks 1 through 3 all playing through record buffer 4, but I can only record from track 4. So essentially, I am staying on this page, listening to this, performing something live, but I don't have to move anywhere because I have it. Well, I should have it set to trig 1 and snap it to 16 just to get myself prepared with like my hands and stuff. So So now it should be in here. So now the whole, I didn't really mean to record the whole 4-bar phrase, but and so that's a really good way to get a live performance in audio form. Obviously, I could do that just like by going like, but there are certain expressive elements that don't carry over from the OP1 because it's not velocity sensitive, for example. So I've actually added some dynamic range to my performance by incorporating the crossfader and giving myself pretty much a customized set of performance-based options. So like this was a filter, but it could also be, you know, a change in the attack rate. So for example, gotta turn this on. So if I were to go, so you can hear it in there. So this really is just like designing your own instrument using the using this as an expressive tool for your performance, which is, I think, a really awesome option. And on top of that, you're using a live sound source, so you can use the radio for that. You can use your iPod plugged into your Octatrack. You could have somebody singing. The options are truly endless. So yeah. Have fun with that, and let me know what you think. If you tried anything cool, if you have any insights, actually, I would be really curious to see what kinds of things people have fed through this, because I think it's still a pretty unexplored idea, is using these like sort of generative sound sources that are kind of doing their own thing, and then letting them in and shaping them live as they're entering the machine. So yeah, best of luck, and see you guys next week.